Hey everyone, welcome to GMIHub Studio Talk. You just got in on a conversation about standards, protocols, and what's happening with live events. What's going to be the future of them, and what do we have to do in order to make them safe, especially with COVID? I'm so happy that we have Morgan Myler with us, who is the Vice President of IATSE Local 58, which is our Toronto chapter, correct? Of the, I guess I'll say the union that covers live events and stagehands and audio. And did I cover it yet?
Yeah, well, live events and performances, television and movies. So we our particular local happens to deal with live events, so Mervish events or live events outdoors. But there's other IATSE locals which do movies, which are currently operating, and television and cameras, animation. So we're the entertainment union.
There you go. So this is one of those conversations that if you are hungry for live events and you want to know what it takes to even to do a live event, to create a live event, this is the conversation you need to listen to. I suggest that while you are here, I'm thankful that you are here, that you share this event, that you go ahead and share this event. The link is on YouTube right now, so go ahead, click that link and share it with anybody and get them to listen in on this conversation. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. And I can tell you a whole lot more, but I don't want to interrupt this conversation. I want to get this going. So, to my lovely husband, Daryl, ask away.
Ask away. Wow. Ask. I don't know if this is going to be asking versus a discussion and poking and prodding and moving forward.
And catching up of knowing each other for that long and both ending up in the same industry. Yeah.
So I've known Morgan since, I'll say, the mid 80s. We were in the same high school. And so we're catching up a little bit on that and where we were, where we're going, what's going on with life now that we're in COVID and as the doors were being opened up. What brought this conversation on instead of some of the other topics that I've promised the audience that we were going to talk about, which is dealing with the DAW and speakers and rooms and all that. Doors are opening up, and we had a great opportunity. I had a number of churches talk to me about putting on drive-in shows. And so I was getting ready to go with that. And, well, that's not happening right now, but hopefully it's going to open up quicker than later. And so I figured I'm going to grab what I've found out is probably one of the foremost experts in putting stuff together. And I've said, can you come and join me? They go, no, I don't want to. Why don't you go get Morgan? Call a couple other guys. You've got Morgan? Just stay with him. He'll take up the whole night with you. So I have Morgan here.
Well,
there's some other reasons why they said that, and which is good because some of the guys who do it going, you know what? Morgan's part of the union. He's got the union backing him up. So they're knowing about a lot of other stuff. And if he says something about rigging and power, he's got the insurance if somebody does something stupid. If somebody says, "Oh, Morgan said that," well, okay. So I'll put this disclaimer in before you actually say Morgan did that. Call Morgan up and have him come and check out, or call a real rigger or a real electrician from someplace, because this is YouTube. That we're just having a discussion amongst ourselves on, we'll call best practices and codes.
Yeah, and the reality is there's some really good, solid information out there on the net. There's also some really good disinformation, but I'm going to say that by all means, anything that, and I talk about this a lot, and anything you have to do in this industry requires due diligence. No one will ever just say Morgan said it. Okay. It's just not going to work for you. You will not do well in any way, form, or fashion. Now, I can give some general advice on how to make sure things work, and I can talk about the performance industry, where to find good information. I mean, the Ministry of Labor has a great portion on their website strictly dedicated to the performance industry and how to do safety around that through Section 21, which was an adjunct to the employment people over at the Ministry of Labor that recommended stuff, and they have everything from, you know, electrical safety guides to outdoor venue guides to rigging system guides. So yeah, anything we do say here tonight, by all means, you know, we're not infallible, but the reality is do your own due diligence. You know, if you're gonna build a 100-foot scaffold out there and try to hang some PA off of it, I'm gonna tell you, my say so isn't a go. uh Get an engineer, and most of the stuff we'll talk about how that, you know, some of that processes happen, obviously.
Okay, I want to go that. You said section 21 of the health and safety code for
No, there was a group of people that recommended health and safety guides, and they were called Section 21. And if you look on labor.gov.on.ca and search for performance industry, you will find everything from child performer safety, electrical safety, outdoor venue safety, rigging safety, all that kind of stuff. So you'll find all those lovely things happening on that site that, you know, and again, talks about working at heights, what to do with flame effects, smoke and smog. Anyways, point in being is, yeah, so I mean, that's a good place in Ontario anyways. If you're looking to start, it's got good solid advice anyways, but it's got advice there for people to look at. Again, one of the things, like, I harp on this with safety is due diligence.
That's great to know. So go to the labor.government site, look for section 21, and there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Ministry of Labor.
Yeah. So because what brought this on was a number of churches have been talking about doing drive-ins, drive-in concerts, drive-in church services. And they're saying, okay, we want to bring in the stage. Let's leave the cost out, right? We'll just have the discussion on, I want to bring in a stage in. Can I just show up on my church property or on my on my private piece of land and open up or build a stage?
Yeah, could you? Wouldn't that be interesting? And I'm going to say the best educated guess on that is no. You're going to have to pull what's called an event permit, and it's a temporary shed or a temporary facility, and a lot of times those need to be depending on the size and all kinds of factors. So, you know, the answer is when you rent your stage. So if you're just going to build a scaffold stage, first of all, you're definitely going to need an engineer's drawing and an engineer to let you know if the stage is going to be able to be capable of taking the weights that you're putting onto it. You're going to need to know if that's going to be able to handle the lights and the trussing and anything else that you want to install on that scaffold stage. And, you know, we've all heard what happens when they don't work out right. And then it's very likely now, you know, on religious services, I'm unsure, but I know in our industry, when we do outdoor events, we need to pull an event permit, and that allows them to come and do the inspection. I don't know that there'd be any difference, honestly, but you know, there is that one factor there.
Okay, so just the way you're talking. There's scaffold structure.
Yeah.
There's truss structure.
Mm-hmm.
There's mobile stages.
Yep.
There is building a deck and putting lifts around the sides to hold truss, pulling up some flatbed trucks.
Yeah, there's an amazing amount of configurations. Like, you know, you can put a concert on, like, just if we're just talking like staging by itself. And I think, you know, you might be better off getting a stage line type stage if you're going to do it. I mean, there's no engineering report on that, right? It's a properly functioning stage line. They know exactly how much weight goes in the roof. They know exactly what the deck looks like. The person who will rent it to you, unless you bought your own, and if you bought your own, get the training, will tell you flat out, this is what we can do and this is what we can't do. You know, and all the stairwells have the rails that are required by law, and it's very much a neat package. When you get into building custom things, that's when the engineering report really makes a big difference. I can tell you that at G20, I was one of the head riggers on the G20 on the lakeshore there, and all the structures were written up with engineers' drawings. And when they weren't, we stopped work. Like we stopped and we asked the questions. We said, okay, well, you know, one of these things doesn't look like the other. why doesn't this stage drawing and the scaffold drawing, especially if we're hanging video wall on this one particular one, why doesn't it look the same? You know, because an engineer is supposed to do the math and calculate the loads, all those wonderful things. So if you don't have an engineer's drawing and have somebody sign off on it, you know, just looking at it and saying that'll work is not the way to go.
What's the thought on pulling flatbed truck? What's the rule of thumb on that?
Well, I mean, so, you know, when we have, so first of all, you would be working at heights. The things are roughly, they're not quite 3 meters, but they're in and around that way. So, you know, if you're talking about just a big flat deck without any sort of guardrails, like you have to consider guardrails, paths of entry and exits, the front of the stage, stability of the truck, like pulling one up works. Now, does that mean I've seen parades use them? I've seen all that. So, you know, there is example of them, but you have to make sure that they have, you know, the guardrails installed and that you've done, again, your due diligence. It's what you should have known or what you'd ought to have known. You know, like I ought to know someone's going to fall off this. So how do I prevent that? And so that's what you'd have to do. And in some ways that actually might be not the way to go because it may require more money, specialized sort of building projects, right? Like where we drive, because basically those stage lines are just trucks, right? They hook up to a truck and they get pulled in, but all the devices are with the stage. All the safety devices are baked in already. That's how they've gotten approved. When you just bring the flat deck and pull it in, that's all the stuff you're going to have to do is build to that. So like a proper step unit will have to be brought in, right? Or how do you do egress? So that's, you know, that's not cheap. You know, carpenters aren't cheap. So you're going to have to make that stage deck. And then that doesn't contemplate all the other systems, right? The lights, like you can put the PA on the stage. So if you don't want lights, you can have some PA on the truck bed and play off of that and, you know, use the sun, which is always a great light source usually. But if it rains or any of those sort of caveats. So is it the worst idea? I mean, if you've done your due diligence and you have the platform stabilized and you know it'll take that kind of weight and you do all those things and there's egress that's safe, people aren't just climbing up on the stage, you know, ad hoc. Yeah, you might be able to get away with it, but you'd have to definitely look in the regs. And also there's municipal regs too, like there's provincial, municipal, and federal regulations that don't necessarily always matter. But you're going to have to look at those and make sure you're compliant, right? Plus to the Disability Act, right? You're making a temporary structure. It has to be compliant to that as well. So participants so do you need now a ramp to your stage? Well, you can get ramps for stage lines, no problem, because they're already designed with that in the future. But can you get a ramp to your truck bed? Maybe not. Maybe you're not compliant. There's so many safety and acts to comply with nowadays in our industry. When we started, I mean, we were doing pyro out of a bucket.
Yep. With guys running on stage in toilet paper. Yes.
Well, you know what I mean? Like it was a different, it's not that it wasn't, I guess, I don't want to say it was any less safe, but there was a lot less seemed to be regulated about our industry. And over time now, the last 25 years, it's become quite regulated.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll never see a guy climbing up ST25, climbing up it, scooting across to the middle of the truss during the live show and changing the DMX codes.
No, you'll never see, you won't see anybody on a temporary lift for sure. And climbing truss is almost forbidden now. Like, you know, there's very rare situations. And again, those with horizontal safety lines and training.
Yeah.
If you don't have the training, you can't even go up, which is strange, which is fair. Let's face it. Everybody's got to go home at the end of the day, right? That's really what entertainment and wherever it comes from, whether we're talking commercial entertainment or information entertainment, because let's face it, you know, we do a lot for information, religious entertainment or religious information, any type of stuff we do is about people. It's not about the show itself. It's about the people that are attending and about the people on stage. And so if that can be that has to be done safely, because those people all deserve to go home, both the people in the audience and both the people on the stage, and the people that set it up and the people that tear it down. So I think that's important to remember that, there's been some fairly horrendous accidents when those type of things have not been, paid attention to.
Sorry, when you said accidents, I just went into my mind about the one big event that had happened that involved a whole stage falling down and a lot of people getting injured and damaged. Is that's just to me an example of what happens when, I guess, something is sort of taking a shortcut, maybe.
Well, yeah, if it's a shortcut, yeah, there's lots of reasons. Like, we can talk. We won't throw any specifics in here. Let's not. But there has been accidents in Toronto. There's been accidents in the U.S. and Ohio, where at Coachella, with that one is pretty obvious. The guy fell out of the air. It was unfortunate. A person been working in the industry. He didn't, whatever didn't happen. He fell out of the air, which is tragic. Usually avoidable. Right. Usually something was happened that was avoidable. In the case of some of the stuff in around our area, there was some engineering that, the engineers weren't on top and lost their, ability to practice. But, some of the stuff down in the States was plain old weather and ignoring the weather. Right. And that's the other thing. Like, here's the, if the church community is going to start operating outdoors, one of the factors that, most churches never really had to deal with is the fact that they're indoors. Weather is like, is it snowing too much? Hey, to get down to the church. It's not that, is there this amazing storm coming in, or rain or lightning or wind? And so anytime we erect a temporary structure outside, we have things that we have to pay attention to, right? The structure is going to have some metal in it. So we're going to have lightning. If there's rain, at what point do we call it, right? What time do we end the service, or what time do we end the show?
Who calls it?
What's that? And who calls it? Right? Well, and let's face it, who calls it should be a professional. They just went out of my head. A weatherman, a professional weatherman, because, and I attended a conference, I think it was about a year before COVID, where it was I wish I remember his name. It was super informative, but he had talked about a lot of stuff in weather and events. And, one of the points he brought up is even weathermen, professionals, designed meteorologists. That's the name I was looking for. Professional meteorologists even mess up, right? They with all the best information and Doppler radar and satellites and all that imagery, they still make mistakes. So how can you be expected as the production manager to be looking at this app on your phone and go, yeah, maybe we should shut it down? Like, I mean, there's obvious signs of when you should shut something down, but if you're planning a large scale event, you should really consider hiring a meteorologist or consulting for sure. But that's another factor, right? Stages will come down, a gust of wind takes you out, takes the stage down, and then you have injuries or possibly death, which isn't good.
So there should actually be a weather plan in place if you're doing an event outdoors.
Absolutely, 100%.
And with the weather plan, there should probably be who's the one who has the final say.
Absolutely.
And is that usually the producer? Is that usually the guy who's on because a lot of it comes down to is most of the gigs I've been on, it's usually the person who's responsible for the stage or the setup of the stage, because that's the biggest thing. Because do they have to lower the stage if it's some of it, or do they have to lower the PA and the video walls or whatever else? Who overrides who, and who has the ultimate say in it's happening? I know doing some gigs in Brampton, I went in and talking with the person who was operating the park. I said, my rule of thumb is I see lightning, we shut it down for 20 minutes. I'm not going to wait for a scene, the second one. And the guy says, okay. He says, you know what? I will, if you're going to shut it down, you come and let me know, because sometimes I will, because he actually says, you might see something which could have been a flash. I didn't see it. And he goes, and I've got my people, which are part of the city, going, this is a rain thing. We do need to be watching out. And they've called it just because of rain at times too.
For sure.
So who's the one that takes the ultimate responsibility? And he's actually said, no, that was just a flash from somebody with thing over there because we were watching for lightning, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye, and I'm going, that's it. And he goes, no, that was a flash. That's the lightning there.
Yeah.
Right? And we just had to wait because we knew it was coming. And he goes, okay, let's call it. And there we go. And we shut down.
Yeah,
But-
and whether that's a temporary shutdown or a permanent route of the event, you're absolutely right. What makes that change? And what's even probably better baked into, like, so all events have safety plans, and I think we have a very high safety record in our industry. But if you're talking about a weather plan, what's even better is to have specific check marks that just are auto-magically calling it a day. I see lightning within X number of miles or X number of kilometers. Okay, that's a check mark. That means we're going to be done, right? I see wind above X number of knots. And, everyone goes, well, how do you determine that? Well, first of all, anyone can buy those devices. But the reality is that you can call your local airport, and that's a free service. They'll tell you exactly what the wind's doing. Right. They do it for their pilots. So you just make that phone go to your local airport. And then there's the internet, right? You can look to see how many knots the winds are in your area. There's obviously an app, but the type of safety plans that are great are the ones that have sort of like auto magical check boxes that say, yep, it's not the only thing that can shut the show down. Somebody does have the highest agency of authority on the site to call it. But if it says X number of knots, this much is happening, this much rain, however those happen to work. And sometimes, if it's a person up in the truss, like, not that we do a lot of truss spots anymore, but if a person's up in the truss and they feel the truss moving because of wind and nobody on the ground's figuring it out, get out of the truss. Yep. Like, it doesn't matter who's calling it at that point. I would always err on the side of caution every time. And if somebody come out of a truss spot in the air and said, I'm not safe up there, I don't feel safe, by all means, come down, no penalties. I'd rather see you live. And we've had, if one of the incidences in not recent memory comes to mind, was just that, right? The guy in the truss was like, I think this is going bad. And no, we're going to stay part of the course. And then accident.
Yeah, I was doing a gig and doing handheld cameras down front, and we knew there was a big storm coming in, and the thunder was louder than the PA, and they still kept playing through. And the video director goes, I got to be here at my front of house. Whenever you guys want to go, just let me know. Grab your camera and walk away.
Yeah.
And we did it for about 10-15 minutes because it's still a ways away. And once it started at a certain point, when it's getting loud, just as loud as the PA, or if not louder, we walked away because it's just like, I want to come back again and do another day. And they kept, and the bands kept going through. Again, I'm not going to get into that, but it's like, that's not wise.
No.
And it is amazing, but it's good to sit back and going, but where is that fine line? Where is 5 miles? Where is 10 miles? So let me ask you this. If there's a weather plan, do you have an app? Do you know an app or that checkbox?
Well, and that was part of what that meteorologist said. I mean, you can check some data, but the reality is that in most of the apps that you purchase, and I think I have one on they only take one slice of the atmosphere, right? So there's only one Doppler image. Meteorologists look at multiple layers. So that, clouds that are way up here may not be the clouds that are down low. The rain that may be in this section may not be there. So if you're planning your motorcycle trip, the app's great. You look at it, go, well, yeah, I'll probably get wet. But there's lots of times I've looked in the app and it's raining. I'm like, what's going on here? And the app's got it flowing my way in 10 minutes. Yeah. So you can't depend on yourself. And that's the other thing. Lightning out X number of kilometers, which way is it going? And this is probably where investing in a meteorologist is a good idea. Somebody who can tell you, oh yeah, okay, well, it's 10 out, but it's heading the other direction. It's passing you. And know that and be ready. Because the other issue is you also don't know how fast stuff is moving. And like if you've ever been boating on Lake Ontario, for instance, right? It could turn like that on you, chop. Like it'd be 1 minute, it'll be like a little dark, and you'd be like, maybe we should head back to the dock. And then you're doing whatever, you're canoeing or powerboating back to a dock, and you've got a lot of chop going. The the reality is the weather systems move fast. So without a professional, I do sound, or I do rigging, or I do, I'm the safety guy, but I might not know about weather, and not everybody can be an expert. Right. So there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't, deal with that kind of thing. Just get a pro in on it.
Okay.
I think that's a fabulous. Like I've never heard of having a weather person on site for an event, so that's enlightening. I got that.
Lightning, but
Oh well, okay. I want to just interject a little bit. If you're just joining us right now, you are watching GMIHub Online Studio Talk here with host Daryl Dewick and guest Morgan Myler, who is, I did say that right. Okay, who is the vice president of IATSE, Local 58, which is our Toronto division of a union that basically covers the live entertainment industry, especially when it comes to staging and decking and sound and everything related to making a live event safe. Um, if you haven't already, I suggest you take that link and you share that. Share that with anybody who is interested in either creating or being a part of a live event, because it's, knowledge is power. And it's so awesome. It would be so awesome if you can get the knowledge that you need to make sure that when you go to a live event, whether it's a drive-in, I know we're in COVID, whether it's a drive-in or a church event, that basically you do things above board, or that things are done above board. I just want to remind you too that you're here on YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and check us out on our other social medias. We're on Facebook, GMIHub.ca. We are on Twitter, Industry Hub. We are on, Instagram. So check us out. Also check our website out, GMIHub.ca, and you will find lots of information about what we do, what we're about, and find out about a Christmas compilation project, which I'll talk about later. But I don't want to interrupt this conversation. It's so good. And back to you guys.
Back to us. Okay, so we'll continue down the drive-in. One of the big things is people go, well, what do we need for power? Can we just not pull outlets from the wall? Can we run power from the house or from the building? Or can I use a Jenny or bring a bunch of car batteries and stick them together? Because how does that work?
Well, power is interesting, right? But you and I both know it takes for a very large, 100 amps isn't going to cut it. Depending on what you're doing, I guess. But I mean, if a band on stage with a PA is definitely filling up your 100 amps. So can you use your outlets in your house? No, I'm going to tell you that's, and furthermore, you're outside. So think about, is it all ground fault? Is it all GFCI, right? Well, will water trip the breakers, right? That's important, right? Because if you're outside and it comes to that rain, you don't want anyone to get hurt, get shocked, or get electrocuted at the end of the day. So, the first thing is, are you ready to be weatherized? Right? Are you following all those regulations for outdoor rigs? And then as far as power source is concerned, well, absolutely. You're going to need a few amps. If you're doing anything at night, you're definitely going to need some major amp. Even with LED lights, it's going to require, a few 100 amp service. Your house, if you're lucky, has 200. Could you get away with it on 100? You're really on a budget for power. And so you've really limited your size of audience. Now, if you're working out of a venue or a church or anything like that, there's disconnects. You might be able to get 400 amp service out of them, and that might be acceptable. But all the safety regulations apply. So I know, for instance, a good portion of venues aren't necessarily non-professional, and I don't know about non-professional, but like housing or smaller shops, if they don't have if they have single cam tie-ins and you don't have an electrician on site to do it, you shouldn't be there doing it. Now, generators are the same thing. Any generator, a 400 amp generator, requires what I like, a dedicated Jenny op, and grounding, proper grounding, based by the manufacturer in Ontario law. Right.
What's that for? Pipe, 1-inch pipe or a 1/2 inch?
There in the city of Toronto, there's actually a map of grounding places where you can actually ground off. So like if you're in public spaces in Toronto, you should be able to find a grounding map where you can actually just ground the generator that, and they have a proof of ground. There are grounding plates that you can put under the tires and rods that meet the specifications depending on the jurisdiction. So they have to be in the ground, or you can prove ground with really expensive devices. But yeah, and each generator will have that listed. Like if you're going to, again, you'll probably do a rental because nobody has these 400 amp generators sitting around in their backyard. And that rental will come with a GMIHub, and you should listen to that GMIHub and have him do, and, make sure that it's ground fault interface so that, you lose power basically if an extension cord or something falls in the water, it trips the breakers either individually or in its entirety.
So can I use my welding cable for feeder?
Absolutely not. It is just not rated. So welding cable is rated for low voltage. The jacket is not sufficient for high voltage. And so we call it 4-aught or 2-aught, depending on the ratio. Welding cable is not. And, it's funny I say that, but, it's really designed for high amperage, low voltage. And if the stars aligned right, the jacket may not be rated for the voltage you're operating at, and somebody could get a shock.
Okay. What about tying into stove and dryers? I know it's not the big amperage that you were talking about, but you got 20 and 30 amps or 20 and 60 amps that you can.
I think, yeah, 20, depending, like those plugs can handle up to 40, I believe, stove and dryer plugs. If you have a plug that's wired correctly, and you have that in an approved panel after it, and not sort of jury rigged, there are possibilities of using those plugs. The plugs are completely legit to use, and that should give you 240 volts at the amperage. Now, you might actually get away with a very small gathering with that. You might be able to get away with a band and some PA. But remember that the panel on the end should be GFCI rated. You want to make sure that if there is a water issue, nobody ends up paying for that and that it trips the appropriate breakers. Anything outdoors should be rated for that at any given time.
What about stages being grounded?
It's best practice. If you can do it, I would. Any staging should be grounded. And there's a 269E Ontario College of Trades called Entertainment Electrician. And in that, the practice would be definitely grounding the stage. And that being said, though, you ground a stage and it's sufficiently high, or if you've grounded your scaffold tower, you've made yourself a lightning rod. So you have to consider these things, right? So standing under your big giant steel stage with a lightning storm's going on, it's probably not the best place to be. It only makes sense, right? It only makes sense. Like the reason we put grounds in houses for a reason, that if any of the power touches ground, breaker pops, everyone's safe, right? It stopped fires, right? Where electricity may have started, all these things. So when we're doing the thing with temporary installations, and again, you can look at a bunch of websites and do your due diligence on this, temporary should be a higher standard for temporary installation, right? Because they're being rebuilt over and over again. There's more potential for it to go a little more sideways than your permanent installation.
Okay. Now, sorry, you were going to say something? Oh. With the drive-ins, they're wanting to, I guess, broadcast on FM.
Yeah.
What do you know the rules and regulations on that?
Well, for the wattage, for any of the wattage, so the overarching governing body in Canada for radio transmission is a CRTC, and they have rules set out for low wattage and high wattage installations for FM. You really have to kind of get licensed for that frequency, for interference purposes, for any of those things. And to the best of my ability, the best of my knowledge, anything that you would do for a drive-in to ensure that everybody would get the signal that was required, you would need to get a license. And so I think you can actually rent, and I don't want to give companies name, like we're not trying to promo anyone here, but there are companies out there that rent the transmitter and the license at the same time. And that's really actually what you don't want to run afoul of the CRTC, that's for sure. And they have some rules, because again, there's first of all, a site survey. You have to figure out if that frequency is even open in your neighborhood. And we all know that in Toronto, especially, the spectrum's densely packed. So you're going to have to find an open frequency, and then you get a permit for that frequency, either permanently or temporarily, or you get a temporary permit for a set of multiple frequencies. Then you have your cars pull in and receive the signal. It's interesting concept, and it works as long as that, people have the ability to receive the signal, they can hear the show. There are some challenges with quality, obviously, as everybody knows. There's, FM requires some pre-emphasis on the audio feed, and, the quality aside, you'll get something in there. For spoken word, I think it works out quite well, actually. But, forget the legal part of it. Trying to mix 36 inputs into FM and make it sound dynamic. I my hat's off to those engineers. They're doing a good job.
That's interesting, though. I never thought you had to have a license. I mean, it makes sense. It totally makes sense. But, when I hear about those, like, FM, what did you call that?
Transmitters.
The transmitters. It almost comes across like, walkie-talkies, if you want to call it that. And like almost, and I know it sounds really funny, but it almost sounds like the equivalent of, get your walkie-talkie. Everyone gets a walkie-talkie and you get to hear what's going on. But actually it's not that, it's actually a whole lot more. So,
yeah. I think and again, there may be some instances where very low wattage, and I do believe that for non-professional low wattage, there are these things you can buy on Amazon, right? I've seen them. I think everyone has. I think maybe if anybody's been through their high school electronics class, and if they're still teaching them the way they should be, you could build your little microwatt unit. They're not going to interfere with anything, but they're also not going to be sufficient enough for 100 or 1,000 or 50 cars. Yeah. Right? They're not going to be robust enough with the electronics to take a good solid stereo signal and send it through. Mm-hmm. So to the best of my knowledge, you need to get licensing at least temporarily for the frequency, and which only makes sense.
I think if you're under 3 watts, and if anybody's listening, please hit me up. I think if you're under 3 watts, you don't need a license.
That's great, but what's 3 watts really going to do for you?
Depends on your antenna.
Yeah, true. But you're still going to be susceptible to anything else. So this gets back to quality assurance for your participants, right? So if you've got an event where 100 people are together and they're gathering your cars and it's all your closest friends, maybe it's okay to use the 3-watt transmitter. Maybe it works just fine.
If you're spending $75 to come in and listen, you're wanting to make sure you're going to get a good signal.
Yeah, and you're going to want to make sure the audio production quality is of a type that is reasonable. If not, it's not going to be that concert feeling of the thump through your chest and all that. And the concerts that hang PA outside at the same time, it's a whole other delay and interesting feature. Yes. Now, the one thing I did consider with the 3-watt systems, if you remember the old movie theaters, they had a license for theirs. The one down the road from my old farm used to be on Green Mountain Road up there, the Starlight Drive-In. I don't know if you remember that place.
Yep.
But they actually piped a balancing transformer and had underground wires all over the place acting as the antennas.
Yes.
And then you took that wire and put it around your antenna. The loop went around, it made contact with your antenna, and you got superb. I think that's how they kept the wattage low on it. It also is how they ended up getting a lot of car antennas, because people would drive away with the end of the night, and it would just rip right off.
So how does that work nowadays when everybody's got them built into their rear glass or just a little itty bitty thing on the back?
That's 20 years ago. That's or 10, 15 years ago. I think the reality is now they've upped their game a bit with transmitter on the inside, but it's a big deal. Like, and with radio, you can stomp over it with anybody, like anything. And so a 3-watt transmitter, you're taking your game, I think.
So here's a question. If we are still in kind of a lockdown situation, even around Christmas time, there are going to be houses that will probably want to do a kind of encourage a drive-through with their homes, not so much coming into their homes, but they'll do a whole light show with their homes, and they'll say, tune into this radio channel to hear the music and see the light show. If they do that, are they getting a license to do that, or is that 3-watt?
I think it's that 3-watt. I don't really care if it gets to your, like, I care that it gets to your car, but if you're not close enough to get it, we're fine. And I think it also depends on the intended purpose, right? Like, one of the things that I find is that, you know, a house doing a 3-watt broadcast or something smaller than that, even 1.5 watts with an antenna on the roof, which I kind of love those displays at Christmas. Like, they're kind of cool when somebody spends the time on that. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think that intent, providing it meets municipal bylaw, you're laughing. But it's that as soon as you make that transition to professional, right? And again, it leaves you open to liability to a certain degree as well, right? Because again, here's your due diligence. So you're in Toronto. We all know the FM spectrum is fairly pinned out in Toronto, and it's mostly because it's discrete, right? Like 99.9 gets picked up all around, you know, being there. So if you suppress their business, if you broadcast over their business, right, interfere with somebody receiving their signal, right, then, you know, you may be subject to some issues. And you're going to hear all their crap on your channel anyways, which your patrons are not going to be happy about. Yeah. So it's the licensing feature. One of the features of the licensing is to say, hey, these are actually the open frequencies. You know, you've done a site survey. This is what we say, and this is what's available for you to license out. And I believe that's the case. And again, somebody can totally correct me if I'm wrong. My best of knowledge is that's the case. You know, it would be the equivalent. It's not the equivalent, but like FRS, for instance, is the family radio channel, right? That's usable by everybody for free. It runs a few miles in a direction, but you cannot use that to broadcast a show, right? The law specifically prohibits that type of promotion to be on there. It's supposed to be an open frequency for everybody to enjoy and use in their camping and their hiking. So, you know, if you look at it, and you can find it on the CRTC's website, or you can probably find a bunch of infographics that'll tell you exactly what frequency spectrums belong to who and where and what it costs for their licensing. You know, same way with 2.4 and 5 gigahertz for Wi-Fi, right?
And here's a little story from the 80s. And I'll bring this up because it is kind of funny. My dad used to be one of the guys who'd walk around and make sure everybody was responsible for falling within the radios, their frequency.
Yeah.
So the first major show at Cops Coliseum, I think it was Metallica that was in there. I'm going to pick on it. Maybe I shouldn't say the name. And my dad kept getting calls from the ambulance station across the street from Cops Coliseum saying, we keep getting music. We keep getting music. Well, my dad was working just down the block, so he would walk down there, listen to it, and he would do the test, and he found out it was Metallica using their wireless.
Right.
And this is VHF days. So, and he walked in and he showed his card. He got in there and talked to the guys. And he said, hey, listen, you gotta use some other frequencies because you're stepping all over our fire and ambulance, and that's a no-no. The guys go going, yeah, we're not going to listen to you. But yeah, we'll listen to you. My dad walked out 20 minutes later, gets the call back, and he walks down, has to talk with the emergency response, walks into the Cops Coliseum again, says, hey guys, that's not cool. You say you're going to do it. Yeah, we just haven't gotten to it. We're doing some more stuff. Dad goes, okay, walks out. He's going, I'm just going to walk over to the emergency responders there and just wait for the phone call.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, right there. They're stomping on us. He walked back in the third time. And he said, so here's the way this works. I'm part of the government. If you don't take that out now while I am here, I will shut this place down. And they actually had the gall to them and said, we're from the States, you can't do this. My dad says, right now I'm part of the government in Canada. I can probably have you jailed because you're stomping on our emergency response. And you go, but what do we do? He goes, there's a shop down there. They actually might have a wireless, because at that point, wireless was very expensive for something very small. It was like $2,000, $3,000 for entry
Oh,
level.
the technology was different, and yeah, there was reasons why it was probably stomping. It might not even have been on the same frequency and could have been stomping.
No, they were
wideband. Yeah. Oh, they were right on it.
Oh yeah, my dad said, I'm going home for supper. If I get a call, we're gonna pull the power, and I will come down and I'll put the lock on the power, and you're not doing a show.
Yeah.
So
I know interfering with emergency services is a fast way to get anything shut down.
Yeah.
And now it happens less and less because they're digital now. And there's
but it was pretty funny. I was hearing guys at the school the following day. I might have been one of them talking about, oh man, it was a great show. I'm going, yeah, you don't know what all happened, but it was pretty funny.
It was pretty, yeah. The telecommunications is a big deal, especially when it comes around emergency services, or people are paying for the rights to use certain frequencies. But you know, the same happens is even if you're using stuff for free, you're still obligated not to cause interference with others.
Like amateur radio, you're not allowed to play music.
Yeah.
So
okay. It's interesting. And I think the concept's great. I think I hope that we, in the promised 6 weeks, we've reduced the numbers down where we can start seeing outdoor events.
Yep.
You know, and if that means like somebody is broadcasting in a 3-watt transmitter outside their church, just check your area for your local laws, because that's really what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
I have a question that seems to be popping up. I don't know if this already exists, but the question is, would we recommend to create and collect a post-event survey that includes questions about the safety procedures that have been implemented so that you can understand how well an event was received? Like, would you recommend that a person doing an event have a survey set up that would follow, I guess, all the safety procedures?
Well, I mean, more information is always power. But so let's think about the safety aspects of distributing a safety survey, right? So first of all, there's going to be some things you have to do, right? I know, isn't this terrible? So there's some things you're going to have to do about collecting this. So first of all, we're not going to distribute paper copies because paper transmits. And so if I'm nope. So paper copies is out. So we got to think of a delivery method. So now we're going to deliver this via the internet, so people's email. So that leaves you with a curious thing. You have to collect information. So you're going to collect people's information. Now, in the case of a church, you may have the information already available on an email list of people who have submitted. But if you're any other sort of entity, you're going to have to provide a privacy policy now, because now you're collecting information. So what are you going to do with that information? So, and believe it or not, privacy policies are definitely part of safety, right? Because the wrong information gets out to the wrong people. Your organization, whatever you're doing, is completely benign organization. But if that information is leaked to the wrong groups, then people can be targeted. So you now have to deal with their information safely. So there's the first issue. Then you deliver the content and what you want, which is fair. And however you do it, maybe there's a bunch of ways to deliver sort of questionnaires and content buy-in. On the logistics side, how are you actually going to get people to buy into this? Like, how would you, is there a contest? Like, when you do this, is there a contest? And then you're going to have to receive it and collate the data. And you're going to have to figure out some ideas around, what kind of questions are you going to ask in that data, right? Were the facilities clean? Was there adequate direction, parking in the case of a drive-in? And so for that to be really effective, you're going to have to ask some quality questions to find that data. And then after that, then it's what you do with the data. Collecting it is nothing, if you've got the right policies in place and privacy policies, then what do you do with it afterward? Are you going to act on it? That's really the key. And are you going to know what's erroneous? Like what is statistically anomalous or doesn't matter?
Right.
So it's a good idea. I mean, like, information is power, but there's there's some other things you got to think about. and then get the delivery back. And then whether or not people even understand what they're asking about.
So is it better just to have a checklist for the little organizers so they know, okay, we got this check, we got that check. Is that better or?
Well, I think so. That's to survey afterward. That's an interesting way to go. But I mean, before that concert even goes up, there should be all the plans in place, right? We used to talk about fire safety plans, emergency plans. There has to be a working at heights plan during construction, rescue plan, which is part of the integrated. There has to be other safety plans that, and there's wonderful people out there that do this for a living, right? They're literally production safety coordinators that have all these templates, what to look for. They're going to do risk assessments on the site. They're going to do risk assessments about the type of event, the content of the event. They'll work with the local enforcement in the jurisdiction, like the fire safety and the police. I don't know if you remember a few years ago when the threat of terrorism sort of popped up in Toronto a little more. All of a sudden, those cement abutments ended up going out around the stadiums and everything. Well, that was part of their safety plan, and they worked with the city in order to get those in place. So you should know before you go into it what you're doing for a safety plan, and it should be on a piece of paper that is fairly well distributed. And the reason why you want that to happen is so that everybody should be versed in the plan. It should have at least been sort of rehearsed to a degree. And because I don't want to go to a point where, okay, we have an emergency and then everybody's lost. No. Well, okay, the emergency's here. What is it? We got to do that. And so then we have to extend those procedures down to COVID as well. So, we were talking a bit earlier before we started, I think, about what about facilities for washrooms, right? Because that's definitely could be a transmission vector, right? Especially with porta potties and all that. I heard one suggestion earlier on in the pandemic that there was rolling sections for those porta potties so that they would have double the amount they would normally have. They would have an uptime of X number of minutes each section while the other one was cleaned, so that there was a continual cleaning cycle going on.
Oh, I can just see people in line waiting to go in though.
But they always were, right? Remember the festivals where people were waiting 100 deep to get to the washroom.
Looking at that going, but we can go use those, and that somebody's going to push through.
Yeah. Or even worse, like I've been to festivals, you get through, you go all there and you go to wash your hands and there's no water.
Yeah.
Right. And so all that is going to have to be planned out logistically ahead of time, how to control the crowd from busting through and hitting those, making sure there's adequate numbers, all that. So that should be part of your plan ahead of time. So yeah, it's kind of like a checklist, but like there's professionals out there that can look at that system and go, well, yeah, that's going to work, or this is not going to work. And then your post survey is going to tell you where or not how many people are infuriated because they couldn't go to the washroom when they needed to.
Yes.
More than anything else.
Yeah.
It's going to be like safety, whatever. I had to go to the bathroom and I waited an hour and a half.
Wow. Okay, guys, if you are just watching us right now or just tuning in, you are with watching GMIHub Online Studio Talk, where we're talking actually about standards for live events. You were here with guest Morgan Myler, who is the VP of
IATSE 58.
IATSE 58, which is the Toronto local division of, I'll say, the union that takes care of live events and everything related with live events and keeping them safe. We have been talking and I've been learning a lot. Like, I didn't even know that other professionals, like, did you know a weather professional could be at your event? And did you know that there are other event safety coordinators for your events? Did you know that? Some of you who've done large events may have, but others may not have. And I know I've been learning a lot, like, from all of this and staying quiet at the same time. But I do want to say this: if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to this channel and share this link to other people who would want to know or who would need to know about this, especially if they're thinking about doing their own live events. I also want to encourage you to go to our website, gmihub.ca, where you will find out all about what we do, what we're all about, how we encourage unity, community, mentorship, and talent growth, and about our Christmas CD compilation, where you can submit a song. If you're a songwriter, submit a song to us by June 13th, and it has the possibility of being part of our compilation album. Go to gmihub.ca to see or learn more about that. And also, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on Twitter, where you can keep up with everything that we are doing. We also have a newsletter that if you sign up for it through gmihub.ca, you can keep track with what we are doing. And we love this part. We love learning about you. We love learning about what you do. And if there are songs you're writing or events that you are participating in, tell us about it. And we'd love to put it in our members happening section. So again, go to gmihub.ca and you'll learn more about that. Morgan, tell us best practices, protocols. Let's summarize all this.
I was actually
Well,
before you do that.
before you do that.
I've got a couple other things here before
Okay.
we get
Well,
there.
before we go there, let's just talk about, I always want to touch on a key point that you talked about, and about like not knowing how many people are involved in a live event. So right now we're going through this global pandemic. I hate to date this video. For those of you who are watching in the near future where there's none of this malarkey, hello, we had a rough time. But for those of us who are living in it now, especially in the entertainment industry, there is so many people involved with live events, not just around safety. So, there are the lighting, the sound, the riggers, the staging people, all the people that get the performance, the artists, all those people, their production management, the people that manage that's the acts, and the people that deal with the renting of the equipment, and the people that, all the elements of the show that you probably could have guessed if you thought about. But the other people you're missing, right? And that also are involved with event safety. You have your front of house people. You have your bartenders. You have your seat people. You have your ticket takers, just the ticket takers alone. And all these people are currently out of work in this pandemic as well, right? These people are all or finding alternative jobs. There are event staffers that work in the venues to keep them glued together in between events. So there's so many people, media promotion people, all of this radio, TV talent that may be visiting to do their promos, all these things around any given event. Hundreds, millions of people, 1 million people at least in Ontario that are directly involved, and their safety is paramount, right? So setting up the show, how do we keep them all alive and safe? How do we keep everybody alive and safe when the audience rolls in? And then how do we keep everybody alive and safe as the show goes away? And as you both know, a show starts early in the morning most of the time, right? 6 a.m. Trucks roll in between 5 and 6. People start unloading those trucks. They set it up by 1. These are, these sort of one-time events. Sometimes there's multi-day setups. And then they run the show. Then that show's taken down that night, packed into trucks and going away. That's definitely the case for most concerts. On some of these AGMs and big things, there's long-term venue management and site safety. So it's an incredibly daunting task. And so, yeah, there are safety professionals that, while I'm doing my job, whatever that may be, and making sure that the show looks or sounds great, there's also somebody keeping us safe. And then that and interfacing with all the municipal and provincial powers to make sure that the laws are being complied with and that's working. So it's an incredible, like, bigger shows, even medium, small size shows require quite a bit of coordination, and a lot of technical staff and a lot of staff in general just to keep them up and hopping.
Okay. So because we were talking about some of the protocols, I'm watching, how do you change over a stage safely? How do you deal with the microphones from bands to bands? Are you swapping out microphones? Do the band members bring their own? Are they used to be sharing the bass amp and sharing keyboards? Is that out the doors now? Everybody has to bring their own keyboards. drummers definitely, well, drummers are supposed to bring their own drumsticks anyways, but cymbals, like, is everything got to be replaced between each band, or is that all movable? Does a quick little Lysol rub on the top of the microphone, is that good enough now?
Especially with COVID.
Well, yeah, like is it? That's the question, right? So microphones, that foam specifically, and this is one of the challenges I've had when we run our safety education, because everyone has to talk through masks now.
Yep.
And so we've had to give them a boom mic. And so first of all, we don't share the boom mics, but when we put them away, we blast them with UV. No matter what you do to the end of a microphone, it's going to damage it some way or somehow over time. UV seems to be the least of the damaging things that, because if you leave anything out in the sun for a period of time, the foam degrades. Right. So, UV seems to be the least. It's also it doesn't get down necessarily as far as it might need to. Like, you need to really saturate that because light may not travel as far as particles. Soaking it in alcohol is not going to help the mic element, that's for sure. So you're going to have to be really cognizant of that and that. So it's really hard. I think in the interim, I don't think we share microphones, to be honest with you. I think that time is over. I've had some people argue that because that costs a lot. Microphones are not
$5 for to rent a 58.
Yeah. So it's not cheap. And that's like, if you're doing a musical, like a theatrical musical with these boom mics and stuff, that's a mic per person plus a backup per person plus. So there's that sharing's done. Yeah. And we've had conversations. So like, equipment's turned around pretty quick. That the last night that equipment was at venue X and everybody used it. And then they just packed it in a truck and it never made it back to the shop. It didn't get cleaned and it shows up at venue Y. Someone was sick in venue X and coughed all over the switcher or the console or the keyboard or anything. So is shared equipment going to be a thing? Well, I don't think I would touch anything strange unless I knew that it at least had a sufficient wipe down. Now, from what I understand, and alcohol is a pretty good deactivator of the virus. And all best protocols say like wiping down things thoroughly and making sure they're clean, plus regular sanitation of your own hands, and not touching your face is a good way of staying, of reducing transmission. Will you ever get 100%? I don't know. There seems to be a lot of breaking out right now with the variants, but again, the science behind it, it changed when we did the safety training. The science changed week to week. I would look up like government sites of how long, for instance, COVID lasted on paper. At one time it was 3 days and then that changed. So that's it. And that was the average. It was something like 3 days, unless it was really dry, and it's all very interesting. So yeah, I don't think sharing anything is going to be a big thing, which for our industry is going to be a bit of a hit, because if you don't have a budget, and time wise, you're gonna have to clean stuff. So guest mixer is going to clean the consoles and all that kind of thing. Right. Not to mention testing. Like, people should be tested. Like, let's just think of the human factor. If you're going to work in close quarters with somebody on stage doing a changeover, these people probably should be tested ahead of time, including PPE like masks and including these other sanitation procedures, because you want to make sure that you're going to catch things if they do, before they do get out of hand.
Okay. You said blast it with a UV light. So I can go and get my little black light and hold that over the microphone, or what are you using to blast them with?
It is a frequency, and I can't see UVC. Somebody in the comments is probably going to run all over this, do a search on the internet. But there is a specific type of black light that it's pretty damaging to biotic structures. That being said, you can't shine it in your eyes. It's not the same sort of black light we used to use, like for staging, although that stuff isn't, it's got its own problems. But there is I think it's UVC, and that you can buy wands that literally sterilize at X number of seconds exposure. The light will tell you. And you could even buy like these whole room things but again, it only sterilizes what the light hits. So you really have to know where the light's going in order for it to work.
So if you have to share, everybody gets their own little muff that sticks over the microphone, and at the end of the gig, at the end of your set, you take it off, put the microphone back. The next guy puts his next muff on.
I think it's probably not even that. Like, it depends on what it's found, but I sincerely believe it's use your mic this gig. This is your mic.
Right.
And we'll clean it at the end of the night, or we'll, if it's a gig running multiple days, this is your microphone. You're the one that handles it. Because remember, we can even get it through contact tracing. So this is your mic, enjoy it for the time period. And then, one of the ways that the virus is definitely wiped out is over time. So, dry area. But so, at the end of the night, we used to have these mic cases, right? Where, you'd have 25 mics in its own case. Well, returning all those mics to the case and then returning them all to different holes again, even could transmit the virus, maybe. So we're just really going to have to rethink our procedures of where we store things, how we store it, what's sanitized when we put it away. It's difficult and it's a lot of planning. So now if you're the RF guy or the deck audio person on a show, you got to think of not, being clean is one of the things you have to sort of sort out, as well as the rest of your duties, to make sure
No
that
throwing the microphones in your pocket to carry more off the stage.
No, I don't think so. I mean, if public health is suggesting that we wipe down shopping baskets, microphones are a heck of a lot more intimate devices.
Right.
So, if that's what the deal is, then I think we're going to have to rethink the way we handle microphones on stage. And that's just microphones. Then you're talking about, do we share the bass amp? That might be a little more easier to deal with because you wipe down the controls, but you do a thorough wipe down. And it may be the person that used it before you is responsible for that because they know what they touched, right? And in combination with everybody sanitizing their hands, that maybe is a solid plan. But it's going to require some thought. I think the days of those quick band changeovers is probably, the battle of the bands where you got 20 bands running in succession with 15-minute to half-hour changeovers. Well, good luck. Do you have a sanitation? You got stagehands, and then you have 20 sanitation people with spray bottles and run out on the stage and clean it, and then clean it like.
Or some of the groups where they just do pass the mic and call up people from the audience. Yeah, that's not going to happen anymore.
Well, no, as I said earlier, the karaoke industry is devastated by this pandemic, I think. It's sad, but, go to the bar and a mic that, 30 other people have handled all night. You going to do that? Maybe not. In the best of days, that may have been a way to get sick. Not casting aspersions on any karaoke DJ out there. They are wonderful, and I have some friends that do the work, but I can't imagine how they're going to return to that. Bars open up. How are you going to have open mic nights? Probably gone, right? In the short term. I mean, all these things we can only hope a future will change with vaccinations and public health and whatever they call for herd immunity in this.
Somebody just, I guess, responded and said it is Myler Pro Microphone Sterilizer UVS-01.
UVS, yeah. So there you go. There's a product someone's developed. Fantastic. Good job.
I'm gonna actually need to look into that, but
yeah, so am I, because it's something we're gonna have to deal with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I think.
Okay, I'm gonna go off to something else because we jumped into COVID. I was gonna wait for that till the end. One of the other things that keeps popping up is hanging lights and hanging video walls. And can I put that? Can I use the shackle I get at Canadian Tire with Princess Auto ratchet straps? Can I just clamp it off my rafter in my building or my room there so that we can hang lights so that we can see?
Wow.
What are the rules and regs and do's and don'ts for?
So as a general rule, there's a few general things I would always run here. First one is, if a piece of equipment that you're using to hang something over somebody's head isn't rated. So whether it's Canadian Tire, Princess Auto, or Crosby brand shackles, they are literally rated. So they most of them have the ratings written on the shackle. And it's either embossed or put into it somehow. So using unrated material is the fastest way to get you into deep water, deep trouble, deep waters here. So always look at the ratings of your equipment. So now that being said, well, my ratchet strap's rated, fair enough, but a ratchet strap, I am positive, and 90% of the instructions for them are not rated for holding an overhead load. In fact, if you find one with that, let me know. Just send it to me, care of the channel. I'd love to see it. But I will tell you that I have not seen a ratchet strap rated for hanging. They specifically say do not use for overhead. So that's the key. If you're using equipment designed for overhead and it's rated and it's been inspected, like round slings or metal, constructed metal wire rope, and it's constructed for that, that's a start. Now, that comes back to, sometimes it comes back to engineering. Sometimes it comes back to a whole bunch of other things. So if you have a bunch of equipment that is a certain weight and you want to hang it in the air, so you have a truss line and lights, you have to make sure that what you're hanging it with is sufficiently robust to hold that up with a safety factor. And so we talk about what a safety factor is. Safety factor of 7, a safety factor of 12, depends on what you're hanging. It means it could significantly hold much more weight than what it's designed to do. But right now, the strap only is good for 1,200 pounds. Will it break at 1,200 exactly? No, it has a safety factor. It breaks at more than that. And that's key to remember, because sometimes things depend on whether you choke them, if it changes the rating and things like that. So systems are usually designed. So for instance, if you have 2 1-ton chain falls, we understand that those are rated for 1 ton, 2 of them. Then we have a truss line with a few hundred pounds of lights and a few hundred pounds of truss, and we're under the 1-ton rating, we're good to go. That is reasonable. If you're hooking them up to a structure that is rated to take 1 ton, i.e. the rafters in a coliseum or a beam that has a 1-ton rating, and you can find that out either by engineering spec or have somebody inspect it, I think you're laughing. At that point, you've done what I like to call, again, the due diligence. All the components are rated to lift that item up. Now, if you're talking about some random bar in the middle of nowhere, and you're hanging stuff off the HVAC, no. If your stuff is not rated, no. If you're hanging, well, there was this pipe above. Well, that's the sprinkler system, dude. You can't hang off to that. No, so you have to do your due diligence. You have to make sure that the points that you're hanging on are not utility points as well. You can't hang on sprinklers or HVAC or anything like that. That's a big no-no, because those points are already designed for what's hanging on them. And there's also a safety factor. Well, first of all, if you're the guy who knocks out the sprinkler system in a building because you hung something on it, good luck with that. You can enjoy your day. Nobody's going to be liking you much. But yeah, so you have to do your due diligence and find out what you're hanging to has the right ratings. And so like for steel slings or for round slings, there's a jacket usually stitched into them or a tag weaved into it that tells you exactly what they're rated for and what you can do with it. Shackles from Princess Auto, some of them, believe it or not, actually come with ratings on them. Some of them also, though, say it says do not use for overhead lifting. Right. And that's one of the things, like if a manufacturer is saying that, don't not listen to the manufacturer. That's definitely a plus. But if you have like rated turnbuckles and rated steel slings and all that, that's the way to go. As long as they're rated for the weight you're lifting. Okay. And that's general. Like, I mean, there's other things that you can deal with. Same things like when you're hanging, and you know this, Daryl, when we're hanging a lamp in the air, we use something called a C-clamp, which is a clamp that's designed, it's usually cast or it's made out of steel, and it clamps a pipe. It's for the ease of taking things on and off. But we never just use that alone. We always back it up with a safety chain. or a safety cable that's rated for the lamp, just in case it tumbles out of the air one day, because we don't want to clock an actor or an audience member or one of our coworkers. So, and that's one of the things I love about our industry. We're always safety conscious. So there's always safeties on projectors and things like that. And then you mentioned video walls. That's a whole special sort of other thing that's key, because they're heavy. And so there's two kinds of video walls, right? And I've had the pleasure of working with both. There are ones that are made for the North American market that have all the safety compliance records for them. So their power connectors are all ESA standard. That's the Electrical Safety Authority. And if you want any information about how to be safe electrically, you can look up, I think it's ESA something, but you look up ESA, you'll find tons of stuff. So those panels are designed and are approved to have in North America. And then because of the nature of LED lighting exploding and Chinese manufacturers, there are these not necessarily approved electronics making our way into the market. So this is lighting fixtures and video panels. The problem with this is, and this is not the case with everything, not everything is built the same. So if you get a good quality video set of panels, all the hardware is rated to hold it together, that all the stuff is got ratings on it, and it all sort of clips together or twists together. It's great. And then you just calculate how much the video wall weighs, and you hang that on a piece of truss that is capable of taking that weight, on some motor points that is capable of taking that weight. You can run it in and out. And if you're outdoor, you also then have to know how that video wall works in the wind, right? It's a big giant sail. So you should know that, right? If there's the stealth wall that was out a while back that had a bunch of holes in it, the wind could go through it. That was much cooler in a sense that it didn't get affected by the wind so much. We have a solid video wall, you got that. But that's another thing you need to address in the safety. If you have these other market brands, some of the panels aren't necessarily grounded. Some of the electrical safety stuff is not exactly like rate legit, like 2 inputs on one panel, which I saw once was amazing. So you could actually at one point plug 2 power inputs into one panel, which is dangerous because one end would be live, terrible thing. And the other thing about it that was dangerous was that you could potentially across phases drop a few extra 100 volts into the panel. God knows what that would do to it. So that's one problem, but also the hardware may or may not be rated. If they're cheaping out on that, are they, the hanging hardware, is it going to hang what it says it's going to hang? So you have to really do your due diligence and understand manufacturer specs. But like at no time is safety good to cheap out on, ever. It always costs you more money in the end. What is that? Penny wise, pound foolish type of thing.
Right.
Well, can I now ask a question?
Yes, you can ask your question.
Okay. Well, before I do, well, actually, I will ask the question. Let's try and summarize. So, safety plans, weather plans. What did I got those 2. What other things that I'm just thinking in summary, because people are watching and they're going, wow, this sounds like so much, but how can we simplify it for someone who wants to do an event?
Hire a safety coordinator.
There we go.
That will save you a lot of trouble. But let's talk about what you need. And so there are crowd safety plans that you need to look at. There are workplace safety plans for your workers that are putting the event up and the people who are visiting the site, both in the tear down, the setup and tear down of the machine, the staging. Any other safety features that come with your stage, if it's, for instance, a temporary mobile stage. So you have to gather all this documentation. If it's a venue you've never been in before, you need their plans for fire safety, for evacuation on top of your venue plans. You'll always need to communicate in large events with fire and with police to make sure that they're aware of the event. You need to get an overall permit pulled for the event. You should consider that. And there are people that literally do this as a job. So I don't do this part, but I know of them and have friends that do it, and it's one of the important things. And then now further on with COVID, you're going to need a biological safety plan, and that's not just to keep the audience safe from when they're getting served their tacos or their alcohol or their snacks, or if they're even that, or where they're seated, because that's going to change the way we seat people. It's going to be frequency of bathrooms being cleaned. It's going to be frequency of the building being maintained or cleaned. Is there available wash up for your servers? Those type of things. And, obviously the mandated PPE, they're going to determine that. So it's really, there's a bunch of plans in there that are around the whole event, right? If you're working at heights and hanging things, you're going to need a rescue plan for those people working at heights. And that's by law. Like some of these are recommended. Most of these are by law. And it's all going to start off with what the safety professionals do is going to be a risk assessment on your event. So that'll be the first thing everybody starts off with. And a risk assessment looks like, or what it sounds like, we have this thing going on. Let's possibly conceive of all the wrong things that can happen. Okay, though, how do we mitigate all these wrong things? So, at the very height of the end, a riot breaks out. How do we handle that? But to the point of how do people operate? How do the bathrooms operate? And are they cleaned on a regular basis? And do we have them on a rotating shutdown schedule? So it's really, the safety planning it starts with a risk assessment. How risky is my event? And that'll tell you whether or not you're even going to do the event. If you have like a bunch of flame juggling sword swallowers, maybe it's not a
Busker Fest.
Different event. But yeah, so that's it. I think to sum up, being an event safety professional is an amazing job. You keep people alive, and my hat's off to all of them, and they have a bigger job than ever. But that being said, all those things, risk assessment, the plans, and for everybody else that's out there that has to work on these sites, or the artists that have to come in, know your rights and know what you want to keep yourself safe, and how to be reasonable with people with short temper, because they're living in the time of COVID, which is probably pushed us all just closer to the edge, because all of our mental health sort of is, especially in the entertainment industry, has been tied up in our jobs, right? Working for a living for a working kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So knowing that, make sure that people are safe on site, that people, are not, your rights, know that, that you have to wear PPE on site. If you have that person that's completely doesn't care about anybody else and doesn't wear their hard hat, steel toes, and mask, what do we do with them? That'll be up to their supervisors in working. When you have that utterly belligerent attendee that's possibly drunk, well, how are they handled? Are they ejected? How are they, how do you keep the security personnel safe? Like, so there's all these things. So it starts with a risk assessment and safety plans around those. And the risk assessment obviously determines some of the plans, like what, if you're doing a drive-in safety plan is going to deal with a lot of vehicular issues, right? What happens if we have an accident on the grounds? Right? Never really thought about that ever happening, but what happens if somebody just benders on the grounds? How's that handled? So obviously there's a lot to think about depending on your event and the hazards you may expose your attendees and workers to.
Well, I hope that you got all that written down, everyone. If not, well,
you can rewatch the show and share it to all your friends.
There you go. You have been watching GMIHub Online Studio Talk with host Daryl Duick and our special guest Morgan Myler, the VP of
IATSE 58.
Thank you. Which is basically the Union for Live Events and basically keeping them all safe. If you didn't catch all of this, that's okay. It'll be here on YouTube for you to watch. Grab the link and feel free to share that with anybody that you know who will be doing an event or is even thinking of doing an event. There are some tips in here that some of it may be commonplace, some of it I found brand spanking new information. So I would suggest you take time to listen to it and share this information. Please do not forget to subscribe. You are here on our YouTube channel, GMI Hub Online. So feel free to subscribe if you have not already done so. Also, check us out on our other social media sites on Facebook, on Instagram, as well as on Twitter. And if you want to know a whole lot more about GMI Hub, check out our website. It's so cool looking. You got to go see it. GMIHub.ca, where you'll learn all about what we do, what we're all about, how we encourage unity, community, mentorship, and talent growth, and about our Christmas compilation project, where if you're a songwriter, you have the opportunity to submit a song to us for consideration on a compilation album that we want to release out in the end of October, beginning of November. We'll tell you more about that, but if you want more information about that, go to gmihub.ca for more information. Also, one last thing, you can sign up for our newsletter, Hub Happenings. It's a monthly newsletter. We don't spam you, but basically all it is information about what's going on with GMI Hub, and also it's really cool what's going on with you. How do we find out about you? Well, you tell us about you. You tell us what you're doing. Tell us if you're writing a song. Tell us if you're singing somewhere. Tell us if you are starting an event. Tell us, and we will put it in our membership happenings in section in that newsletter. It's a way, again, that we want to encourage community as well as unity. And we also want to encourage mentorship and talent growth. There's so much things that are going on, but I thank you so much for watching us right now. We will be back next week where we'll be talking about songwriting and how to get your message across in your songs, how to get your mission across in your songs. And we will have John Chisholm from Nashville Christian songwriters coming to us, as well as Allie Matthews, an award-winning songwriter. So it's going to be exciting. You will not want to miss that. Until then, though, we want to say thank you for joining us. Again, thank you, Morgan, for being with us. It was an absolute delight hearing you and learning from you. And
Thanks for having me. It was great. Thanks. It was good to talk. Good to reconnect too.
Yes, definitely good to reconnect.
And we will be back next week. Until then, have a great week, and we'll see you later.
See you later.
Keep safe.